Hello, everyone. This is Berl Schwartz. My guest today is Natasha Atkinson, who just revealed that she was fired in February from a post in the office of Mayor Andy Schor. Ms. Atkinson has alleged racial bias played a role. Ms. Atkinson, thank you very much for joining me. We know each other from a distance because you were a scheduler and you scheduled some meetings for me with the mayor. But I'd like to get to know you better. Tell me a bit about yourself, where you grew up and went to school, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Yes, I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in South Florida. I graduated from an HBCU, North Carolina Central University, with my bachelor's in mass communications, with a concentration in public relations and a special focus on crisis communications.
And,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, when did you graduate? And if I may, how old are you?
Yeah, I graduated in 2014. And I moved to Michigan in 2013. Sorry, I'm doing dishes. I moved to Michigan, I'd say probably the summer 2013. And I'm currently getting my master's at MSU in social work.
And why did you come to Michigan?
Plethora of reasons. At the time, the gentleman that I was with got into school at MSU, and so we packed up and moved.
Well, that's not an unusual story. I've stayed here because I met someone, so I get it. I want to find out when you went to work for Mayor Schor, and what were you doing after school until you were hired by him?
Stay-at-home mom. I have 4 kids, so I was at home for a little bit and worked just a couple of jobs.
And how did you end up going to work for the mayor?
I met Marilyn Plummer at a oratorical contest for high school seniors, a scholarship contest. We were in contact. We had a great conversation at this oratorical contest. We kind of talked about the city and things we'd like to see done with youth. And we just always kept in contact. And it's one of those weird things where you meet somebody one time and then everywhere you go, you keep seeing them. So I had one of those experiences with Marilyn. And then she reached out to me last summer and told me that Mayor Schor's office was looking for something. She was going to retire soon and was looking for someone to kind of take over. So I agreed to come on in. And at that point, I met with the deputy mayor and the office manager.
And you said that was you started last August?
No, I started last June.
Last June, okay. All right, so you tell us your story regarding the workplace environment.
So I think I've said it, that I really was excited to come on in. I was excited. I live in East Lansing, so I really didn't know much about Andy Schor. So I kind of did some research, and most of what I could find was his campaign stuff. And I just was enthusiastic to come to work. I really thought, wow, what a great place to be in an environment that was inclusive, that spoke of diversity, that didn't kind of do the I don't see color, but kind of acknowledging. And so there was excitement there. And I was excited until Black Lives Matter came to the office and I saw that reaction. I think that was the first kind of red flag for me about the environment.
What happened with Black Lives Matter?
Black Lives Matter came to the office because there was that situation with the 16-year-old girl in LPD.
The one who was hit in the legs repeatedly.
Yeah. So when they came to the office, when we knew that they were downstairs, I kind of made comment and said the mayor should prep before he goes outside to see them. But I guess his advisors within the office thought that that wasn't important to do, and that he would just go out there and let them know he had another meeting, take whatever documentation from them, and he'd go about the rest of the day. Although I thought that was a bad idea, what could you do? So he went out there and told them he had 10 minutes. You know, it was, to me, it was kind of harsh, the treatment, the tone. But I don't think I had a huge problem until I went to talk to the deputy mayor, and one of my coworkers came in and said that Black Lives Matters is nothing but a dog without a bone. And that's when I was like, oh.
What did you take that as meaning?
I will tell you what most people of color will hear that to mean. And I'll tell you how I justified it to continue working. There's the comparison to animals, right? A dog without a bone. So, I mean, the initial thing was, are you calling the Black people who just came here animal? You're calling them dogs? I think, you know, I then went down the list and said, you're lucky you said that to me and not to other people, because it can be read that you're calling the Black Lives Matter people animals. Or that this is a useless cause to fight for the rights of this young lady.
So it had a double meaning.
I think it does. It has to. I think we have an obligation when we say things that there's impact and intent. And even if that's not your intent, you have to recognize that sometimes the things you say have double impact on people.
Who made that comment to you?
A gentleman within the office who's not of color.
Who's not what?
Who's not of color.
Not of color. And may I ask you, at that time, now Marilyn Plummer is an African-American woman. Were there other people of color working on the mayor's staff with you?
Oh yeah, I mean, that particular day, I don't believe that Marilyn was in the office. Both Marilyn and Bishop worked part-time.
Bishop Maxwell.
Bishop Maxwell, yes, correct. They were there occasionally. They both worked part-time, and often a lot of their, as community outreach and the fellowship liaison, I think, you know, oftentimes their meetings are off-site.
And about how many employees would you, do you know approximately are on the mayor's staff?
Nice. Uh, 8 to 10, depending if you want to add interns. So somewhere in that range.
Were there any interns of color while you worked there?
I'm sorry?
Do you recall if there were any interns of color while you worked there?
No.
All right. Well, so that incident was your first indication that there could be a problem with race relations on the mayor's staff.
Yes.
And where did things go from there? Did you talk to them about this? Did you follow up with them?
So after that, shortly after was when Chief Yankowski left and retired. almost immediately after this incident with the young lady, we got notice that Chief Jankowski wanted to retire. At that point, we knew that it was going to be Darryl Green. The press release came out. And again, there was some community concern about the lack of information about Darryl Green on both ends. So we had some people who were like, who the heck is he and what makes him qualified to be chief? And other people were making speculations that it was just because he was African American and the young lady who was, injured by the police. And so there were various things floating around the community. And so when the press release came out, I was like, well, nobody mentioned any of Chief Green's qualifications, like the fact that he has a PhD or anything other than how many years he's been with the force, which does not make you qualified to be a chief, right? So there was that discussion. And in that frame, I remembered that I had taken a training through the Ingham County Health Department. It is the Social Justice and Health Equity training. It's a 3-day training. 2 days are back to back, and then the third day is about 2 weeks later. And at that time, I had taken it with Jessica Yorko. And it was just a beautiful moment where people of all different races, all different backgrounds, we had LGBTQIA representation. And so we were able to learn from each other, learn how to speak to each other, why people are offended by certain things, and just better ways to relate to one another. And I thought it was a beautiful training, and I got so much from it that I thought it would be helpful to send people from our office there. I spoke to Samantha, our deputy mayor, about it, and at first she seemed interested. So she said, yeah, go ahead and send the information to the employees that her and I discussed should go in the first round. I think that they offer it every couple of months. And so we would send a couple of employees at one point, and then the next go round, we would send some more. When I sent the training information, that is kind of when people started looking at me funny, like, why do I need to go to this? Why are you accusing me of being racist? And it's like, no, but I can see, the community that we're serving doesn't look like you. And you aren't relating well to them. So maybe we should go and learn and be better to each other. But that's not how it went. I think at that point, people just started feeling like me calling out different microaggressions was me playing the race card, which wasn't necessarily the case. It was more like, hey, this is offensive. You probably shouldn't say that. I don't know. When I got hired, one of the things that always stood out to me in the interview was that the deputy mayor said that she wanted someone to give the young Black perspective, that they wanted to do better. And so I came in with that perspective, making suggestions and pointing out the things that you said that you wanted assistance with. But I think the staff, I would say the staff more than the mayor, were not happy with it. And he stood by and watched me being ignored and mistreated in the office and did nothing to rectify it.
By ignored, what do you mean? Can you give any examples?
There were weeks where no one talked to me.
Literally down to, they wouldn't say hello? Or
no, I would walk in and say hello, and it would be like I wasn't there. Our Christmas party, the deputy mayor did not even say hello. She walked right past me as if I wasn't there. So.
Were there any performance issues that it could have impacted your relationship?
I don't think my performance issue, that there was one to begin with. But I also don't think that that would have impacted anyone else's job for them not to speak to me. I'm not a secretary. I'm not a scheduler. That's not what that's not initially what I was hired to do. It was offered to me a week later because the person who was doing it was not doing a good job. I'm the mayor's fourth scheduler. Let's be honest. He's been mayor for how long? He's had 4 schedulers. That's a lot. I'm college educated. I'm getting a master's degree. What I came in there for was to be office assistant until Marilyn retired. Then they offered the scheduling position. And I don't know how many people have been a scheduler, but it's a task, to get to know the person, to get to know their family, because to be honest, when you're the mayor scheduler, you are dealing with 50 million requests on the daily. Everybody wants to talk to him. Everybody is his friend from way back when. Everybody needs something. And you have to manage his family obligations too, right? You got to put on there his daughter. Remember, your daughter has a recital. Don't forget, your son needs to go, So I wouldn't say that there weren't times where the mayor's like, look, I need you to switch up the way you're doing my calendar. Those definitely did happen. But again, that doesn't mean that the graphic design person doesn't talk to me. That doesn't mean that the public relations person doesn't speak to me. You know what I mean? So in that aspect, I would say no.
So let me back up a bit then. So people were talking to you before you suggested sensitivity training might be in order. And that's when things changed?
I think that's initially when people started distancing themselves and feeling like I was attacked. It was the crime, like, she's attacking me and she's calling me a racist. Like, I literally had a meeting with the deputy mayor and another employee to say, look, I don't think you're racist. I think you don't think about anybody who doesn't look like you. That doesn't make you a racist. That just makes you oblivious. And as somebody who works in the mayor's office, who's dealing with a variety of people, a variety of races, you have to be able to relate to everyone. That's an obligation. You're not working at Meyer. You're not working, at some company where no one's going to see you. You are front and center. Eyes are on you at all times, and anything you say can be misconstrued and have a whole community feel, ostracized.
Now, you were expecting then to replace Marilyn Plummer, who was
community,
and she was involved in community relations, if I
correct
remember. And then they switched you to become an inside person, basically a scheduler. Is that?
Yes, because
Okay.
Marilyn she still hasn't retired. She's retiring at the end of June. Yes.
Okay. So then you brought us up, I think, to the Christmas party, and then how did things go after that?
I think after that is when it got pretty bad. The mayor and I had a meeting, at which point I discussed with him that being at the front desk was a lot to handle. Kind of that switch between end of semesters, we lost all of our interns, we hadn't interviewed new interns. And so being one of the 2 people at the front desk when the other person's gone, I'm kind of stuck with everybody coming through the door. The phones ring at the front desk before they ring anywhere else. And I'm still obligated to get his calendar together. And I'm events coordinator. So, dishes. And so I said, hey, there was an offer initially when I started to have the office that the office manager was using. I think we need to make that switch now because this is getting intense. I think the office manager wasn't happy with the fact that I asked for her office. So, I mean, ultimately, I did get the office. When I was not in the office, that probably between Christmas and New Year's, we had like I don't know, on and off schedule. Some people were working from home a couple of days. Everyone got an opportunity to work from home and come into the office, if that makes sense. During the Christmas, that time between Christmas and New Year's. I got to work and no, I got a text saying, hey, the mayor wants us to switch spaces now. Do you mind if I move the stuff? And I was like, well, I was hoping to do it tomorrow, but sure, go ahead. So when I came into work, probably the 26th or somewhere around there, all my stuff was in the office. I got it all decorated, but I noticed no one was there. Like no one was communicating. So I went up to the front. I said, hey, nobody responded. I was like, oh, okay. That's weird. So in getting all my stuff together, I sent an email asking for some different color folders so that I can sort the mayor's meetings and different papers that I have, so I know what goes in and what comes out. And I was told that I needed to use my own money to do that. I was like, oh, okay. All right. So I sent something to Nick Tate and I asked him, I said, hey, look, this is
Nick Tate, he's in finance.
He's the labor negotiator, but he's also like I don't want to say staff person, but he generally deals with our issues and staff and that kind of stuff. So I, sent him a copy of the message and the reply. And I said, look, this is getting tense. I can't even get pens. Like, this is kind of getting crazy and I don't want it to go any further. At that point, Nick Tate, kind of asked her and said, hey, can you get these? And I was like, look, I'll just buy it myself. It's not that serious. It's a $5, $4.99 pack of pens. It's really not that serious. It's a couple of folders. I went down to another office and just borrowed some folders from HRCS and called it a day. But I mean, it got that bad. And still, even after that message was sent, nothing was done. Yeah.
All right, so we're up to about the end of the year. What happened? What was January like? Same sort of thing, or?
So January was a little crazy. January was, I would say, before New Year's is when I sat down with the finance director, the current finance director, and had a conversation with her outside of the office to just kind of talk. I think part of it was advice on how to deal with what was happening in the office. Some things that I thought were inappropriate. And then also to talk with her about pay and how to negotiate and really just how to, because it felt like what I was saying wasn't received well. And so I really just went to her and was like, look, you're the chief strategy officer. That's initially what you were hired to do. As somebody who I have respect for, help me, because I don't know what to do in this situation. And I kind of just laid it bare. I told her, I said, there are days where I sit in the parking garage and I cry because I feel ostracized and hated in the office, and just for simply asking to be acknowledged. We did a whole training, I don't even know what you would call it, like a bonding training for us to be able to bond with each other. And even in that, all I asked for was to be acknowledged and to feel part of the team. And that just never happened. It never happened. there were days where I felt like, okay, I'm part of the team, but then I can't help but say, like, you know, things didn't sit right. It didn't, I don't know how else to explain it. I really don't. It felt like I would get things like, you know, I saw all Black women hated white women, you know, but with you, I don't feel that way. Comments like that. Or comments like, oh, when I see a good looking Black man, my ovaries just scream out. Like, things said like that, you know, you're like, okay, so I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, Berl.
Have you ever felt like that in any other job?
You know, I said when I was on the show on the other show on Friday, being African American, you hear these things all the time. There's not a place where you're not going to hear or feel something. I think what bothers me the most is the expectation that I had for people who are in office, who we voted for, people who ran on diversity and progressiveness and transparency. To have that happen there, I think is the most disheartening.
I've taken more of your time than I intended, but we still haven't gotten to the issue over the credit cards. If you could tell me what happened, I'd appreciate that.
So, absolutely. I would say that there were 3 occasions that I personally witnessed, and that's not to say that it didn't happen any other time, but 3 occasions where I personally was invited to lunch, feeling like, oh, I'm part of the group. And alcohol was ordered. So one of those times was at Tropo, probably around the Silver Bells planning. Not probably, definitely while we were planning for Silver Bells, we looked at Tropo, and on that day, wine was ordered for lunch. And
so and this was a business lunch, but it is a little surprising to hear of alcohol being purchased on a city credit card.
Absolutely. So that was then. That was probably the last time. So then we'll go back, and I'd probably say sometime in October, there was another lunch at Midtown Brewery, which is next to the cigar shop. And beer or mead or whatever it is was ordered for lunch. And the very first time was at Tappan Tavern. And again, all of those times the bill comes and then it's, oh, I got it. And a city card is used. And then the process is you do not get an itemized receipt. You just get the receipt, you know, that shows the credit card and the tip and whatever. And then there's a particular person that you would go to in finance. And that particular person would do the memo. And in that memo, you just say, I lost the receipt. It was a business lunch or a meeting, lunch meeting. And she wouldn't ask any questions.
And so did you find out anything more about this practice?
When I said that I wasn't surprised because alcohol was in the office, it was. When our interns left in August, we had Moscow mules and mimosas for lunch. I mean, in the middle of the day, around noon. And
do you think the mayor was aware of this?
The mayor absolutely was out of town. And I remember being called to like, everyone come out here, and being told the alcohol needed to leave. At which point we had 2 bottles of champagne in the fridge. And there's some cabinets in the fridge, and above it, on the other side. And so that's where the Moscow Mule drink ingredients and the alcohol sat probably until Silver Bells. And then Silver Bells, we pulled it out and finished it. But champagne bottles, there was people in the kitchen taking the champagne to the head in the middle of the day.
So this is during a work day.
Yes.
And do you think the deputy mayor was aware of it? Do you know if the deputy mayor was aware?
He brought some of the ingredients.
Then what happened?
So that was probably the first time. Then after that is when we started having the alcohol during lunch meetings. So at first I was like, okay, maybe this is the practice. Like, I don't know. I've never been in politics. I don't have a P card. We're drinking in the middle of the day to celebrate interns leaving. But we then had some financial.
Let me interrupt. This was drinking in the middle of the day with interns present?
Oh, it was to celebrate our interns leaving.
Okay.
So then all the alcoholic lunches, and then we had Angie Bennett left. We had Shelby Freyer come in, and we had this conversation about investigating P cards. That is when I understood what P cards, the city credit cards are, where the money comes from, what should and should not be used on there. Because prior to that, if you didn't have a P card, you didn't know, you don't get that form that says a P card can only be used for this, this, this. I didn't know. So we sat in this meeting, and Shelby Freyer started talking about going through department by department P card usage and investigating and just making sure that everything's on the up and up. That was probably late November, maybe December. We had this meeting.
Who was in this meeting? You don't have to name everybody.
All of us. We kind of did like a revamping of ethics and sexual harassment and all of that stuff. And then we had this thing with Shelby, and she kind of talked us through. Every Friday we have staff meeting, and Shelby is in there, all of our staff, and Shelby would come into, and then we kind of talk about what we're doing, where we are, what projects we're working on, what's happening in the city, who's going to what events, what expectations the mayor has for the following week. So in one of those meetings is when Shelby kind of went over what that training was going to look like. That is when when I learned about P cards and what exactly they should be used for. So in that meeting that I had with Shelby about how to relate to the mayor and everything else, I explained to her what was happening. The P card use, that I was there, that, this is.
So in essence, you blew the whistle.
So that was early January that Shelby and I had this conversation. It might have been late December.
So it was a one-on-one conversation?
It was a one-on-one conversation at Big B. The Big B right there at the back of City Hall. Mm-hmm. We call it the House Big B. I don't know if that's what it's really called, but anyway, we had this conversation shortly after. The conversation led with a lot of things. We talked about parking in the basement, where you can come through the Sally Port door and park underneath City Hall. As a mayor scheduler, it's spray painted on the wall that there should be a parking space for me, but for some reason the mayor decided that I don't get a parking space down there. So Shelby and I had a conversation about that too. Like, even the people who work in City Hall, like the facilities people and security, were like, this is the first time in like 30, I've been here for 30 years or 20 years, and I've never seen the scheduler not have a parking space. So, you know, the mayor and I kind of went back and forth about that. I mean, there were just so many instances where it was like, even the pay, I was like, well, I'm not making what the other schedulers made. Why is that? I'm just as educated. I don't see a difference. You thought I was so good that within 2 weeks you made me your scheduler. You know, like I don't understand why I didn't have a parking space. So Shelby offered me her parking space, which I appreciated because she had taken over for Angie Bennett. So she had that. Shortly after, the mayor came into my office and said, if I have a problem, he came in very upset that I don't talk to Shelby. Shelby doesn't regulate my pay. Shelby doesn't this and Shelby doesn't that. And that I needed to come to him directly if I had any issues with anybody in the staff. And I said, okay. And I left it at that. Then I spoke to Shelby and I was like, hey, look, I hope I didn't get you in trouble. And that's when she informed me that Samantha the deputy mayor had gone through my calendar and called Shelby and asked Shelby what we met about and why we were meeting at Big B. I assume that Shelby told Samantha, and that's how the mayor knew and came to me, and so here we are. The P card was never taken from the person that I said all of this happened to, and as far as I know, there was no investigation on whether or not the P card, whether or not those transactions actually happened. What did happen, though, was a new form came out that said if your P card is used inappropriately, or if you go over a certain amount of memos, which is that form that you would fill out saying you lost a receipt, that they would dock it from your check. So they recognize that there's a problem, but instead of letting go the person who caused the problem, they just swept it under the rug.
I'm guessing you don't want to disclose who that person was.
You know, we have 3 P cards, and it's as simple as filing a FOIA.
Okay. So you were already getting the silent treatment. What happened after the mayor?
So it came time to plan State of the City. As event coordinator, the afterglow and should have been my responsibility. So I started kind of talking about it, and that's when I was informed that I would not be planning the afterglow to State of the City.
Why? Did they say why?
No one expressed why specifically, except for it was the deputy mayor's event and she was selecting who she wanted to select to do it. That's all. So I sent an email detailing why I thought I should be able to do it, why I felt like it was important that I do it as it's my job title. And I was met with the same, thank you, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've already made my decision. I said, okay. The guest list, I talked to the mayor about it again, and I said, hey, the State of the City guest list, can I see it? Can we make sure that we have the right people on there? Make sure that the city is well represented? The mayor said yes. When I asked the person that the deputy mayor appointed to plan it, I never received it. I asked multiple times for it, never saw it. What I did receive was, well, what everyone received was, if you have anyone you want to add to the guest list, send us names and email addresses. Can you see me still? Yep. Send us names and email addresses as soon as possible, or by 3 o'clock today, some random time. So I added some names, in particular, Debbie Acapulco, who is the Deputy Health Director at Ingham County Health Department, and a few other prominent African Americans within the community, Donald and Hope LaBelle, who do an entrepreneurship class and help minorities really find funding, connecting them with banks to open their businesses and different things like that. So I had a list of a few people, and everyone on my list was rejected. Never received an invitation. I received an email saying, who are these people? And I was like, oh, okay, well, here are their credentials. Here's who they work for. This is what they do. And they help out our community. Again, they were not added to the guest list. So we had our planning meeting for State of the City. Everyone received a folder with, you know, where to be, what rooms within the Abigail were going to be the mayor's room, the performer's room, and all these other spaces. I never got a folder. So I'm in the meeting and I said, I don't have a folder. Oh, I'm one folder short was the excuse, and a scramble to grab papers. I look and I say, oh, I don't have an assignment. I mention it, I show it to Nick Tate, and I say, look, I don't have an assignment on here. Oh, you do have an assignment. It's on the other paper that I don't have for you. I'll get it to you. Okay. Never got it. So I get to State of the City. It was my job to find the woman who sang the national anthem. It was my job to organize with Steve Lonzo to get the students to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And it was my job to find someone to do the invocation. I did those things. So didn't have much else to do at that point. That was it. Somewhere, I would say January, God, I can't even think what date it was. Back in January, I had gone to the hospital. It was right after my desk was trashed. So the day after State of the City, I went to my cardiologist appointment just because my blood pressure was all over the place. They couldn't figure out what it was. They said it was anxiety. I figured it was anxiety, but just to be sure, I was having shortness of breath. My heart was racing. So I went to a follow-up appointment the day after State of the City. Then that Friday I came to work, and we had been working on getting a diversity officer for the city. And I received an email from Nick Tate saying, hey, I want to meet with you about that position you're trying to get the mayor to adopt. And at that point, him and Linda came in and said that I was terminated.
Did they give a reason?
No. When I asked, they pointed to the clause that says we're at-will employees.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, but first, your desk was trashed. What was that?
Yeah. So in two instances, one was, and I have it in my calendar, so both in January, one in early January, one in mid-January, I just came into the office, all my papers were on the floor, and every single drawer was open. It was Friday before staff meeting. I took a moment to gather myself, and I walked into staff meeting, and in front of everyone in the office, I said, I recognize that none of this stuff in here is mine. It all belongs to the city, but if you need something, please ask me for it, rather than going through the entire office. The mayor looked puzzled, and he said, what happened? I said, well, everything on my desk is now on the floor, and every single desk drawer is open. And then he told me, well, maybe it was the cleaning people because, you know, they left my drawer open too, but I noticed that they took my scissors out and left my scissors on my desk. And I was like, okay, that's not what happened. But we just moved on as if it didn't happen. The second time I walked into the office after a meeting, and I had one of my coworkers with me. When I opened my office door, she looked and she's like, oh my gosh. I said, yep, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And I started crying, and she's like, this is internal and this is personal. And I think at that point I thought she was gonna say something for me, that she was gonna, but instead she just helped me pick up the stuff. And I, in tears and not even really thinking about it, just picked up the stuff and put it back on my desk. And all the desk drawers weren't open this time, but everything that was on top of my desk was on the floor.
So you were terminated after State of the City, which was February 7th.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't come forward publicly until last Friday. Why did you decide to come forward at this time?
I think it's twofold. I had spoken to a couple council members, or a council member, a city council member, about what happened, and I just thought that the situation was going to be rectified. Honestly, I thought she was going to come forward and say, I looked into it, I'm requesting these documents, and really just vindicate me, I guess. I don't know what. I just thought that she was going to do something. And as time progressed, I think then Corona, all of that happened. And I have 4 kids and a life. And honestly, all I've heard from people who have a story similar to mine is that this administration is going to assassinate your character. They are going to destroy you. They're going to call you names. They're going to say that you weren't a diligent worker. They're going to do this to you. And a part of me was scared about where my life would go. What job am I going to have later on? It potentially could destroy your career. I think after seeing the video of the people being gassed with tear gas who were on their knees, I think at that point I was like, no, this is enough. This is enough.
You're talking about what happened in downtown Lansing last Sunday?
Yes.
You've been very generous with your time. Before we go, you alluded to this happening to other people. So do you feel like there's a pattern here?
I think there's a pattern of a lack of acknowledgement. Okay. I think people think that being racist is throwing the N-word around. I think people think that being racist is this overt action. And I think that when we start talking about institutional racism, when we start talking about covert racism, things that sometimes are inherent in nature because you don't think about it, yes, I think that there is a pattern of that.
Well, Natasha Atkinson, I want to thank you very much. I'm sure this wasn't an easy decision for you to go public with this. And I hope that things turn out well for you. It is a very compelling story. Thank you so much for being on City Pulse.
Thank you.